Let's get ready to rumble!
5 Live Boxing.
I'm very much in my peak. I think I'm at the top of the hill.
And down goes Mac from the follow-up right hand. Good shots from Froch.
I'm going to be firing on all cylinders, all V12 cylinders.
Froch just stalks his prey and then hits him with a huge right hand. Bunce in trouble again, and another one.
Just watch Lucien Boutte walk back to his corner like a drunk on a Saturday night.
As long as my tank's full of juice, I'll be putting the arsenal on Kessler.
And Kessler was forced to back up, and a second one from Froch gets through.
I feel good, I feel more wise as a fighter.
Kessler is trying to open up again.
I'm fully aware what kind of man he is. He's a warrior like myself.
The two men smile at each other. It's a smile of respect.
And the new WBC super middleweight champion of the world, Mikkel Kessler.
That was a bitter disappointment. It was a bad loss for me. I was devastated, but I picked myself up, and then I came back and I became 3 times world champ.
Lucien Boutte's corner and waved it off, and for the third time, Carl Froch is the super middleweight champion of the world.
So if you're looking for a prediction, I'm confident that I do what I know I can do. I'll get him out of there in a late stoppage, or he'll quit on his stool, because I just can't see him staying with me.
Between now and 10 o'clock, we'll be looking ahead to Carl Froch against Mikkel Kessler. It's one of the biggest fights of the year, and naturally it's live on 5 Live, 10:45 p.m. this Saturday after the Champions League final from London's O2 Arena. As I say, we'll talk about this for the next 50 minutes, and then Phil Williams will take over with his regular programme earlier than normal. I'm Ian Payne. I've been joined by the writer and broadcaster and 5 Live regular Steve Bunce. How are you, Buncey?
Fantastic, Paney. Fantastic.
5 Live's boxing commentator Mike Costello's with us as well. Hi, Mike.
Evening, Ian.
And delighted to entertain Robert McCracken, who trains Carl Froch. He's with us as well tonight. Hello, Rob.
Evening.
How is Carl?
Yeah, he's very well. I've just left him half an hour ago. He's feeling good. We had a little shakeout earlier, and he's looking forward to the fight.
What's a little shakeout?
Little shadow boxing, little skip, little fiddle about and stuff, and just get things into his mind. So he's in a good place at the moment.
What does he do for the rest of the week, Thursday and Friday and Saturday during the day?
Well, he'll go walking tomorrow morning, get out and walk for about 45 minutes. I'll get over to him for 3 o'clock and we'll do a bit of pad work where he hits the pads and works on tactics for the fight, and just getting everything in place, really.
Steve, put this into context. How big a fight is this?
Well, it's one of those rematches that's come around at the right time. It's one of those rematches that we haven't had to wait 5 years for, 10 years for. It's come around at the right time. They're both champions. One of them's not going into the ring on a losing streak. Neither of them are going into the ring with any clear dip in form. You know, the memories of the first fight, just over 3 years ago, are still vivid. They're still evocative. We can still feel it. We can still sense it. Mike was listening to the fight, and I was watching it again recently, and we got plugged straight back into it. And that's why this rematch matters, because it feels like the next week, the next month. It was inevitable that it would happen again, and it's just a pleasure and a delight that they saw sense and have made it happen again.
Well, Mike, you were at today's press conference. What was the mood like there? What happened?
Well, I think the build-up to the first fight and this one have been marked by good manners and the lack of trash talk. But for all that, there was a charge and an edge to today's proceedings, I thought. And there are a number of reasons for that. Kessler's 34, Carl Froch is now 35. And although they're not at the end of their career, one of them might be significantly closer to that point come Saturday night. And I think they're both very aware of that. They've been in this position a number of times. They've had more than 20 world title fights between them. So they know what they're doing at this stage of the build-up to a fight. And in terms of how you measure the scale of an occasion, I think one of them today we saw with the presence of Michael Buffer, the great MC who was hosting the press conference, and also the turnout of reporters from not just the UK but in Denmark as well. And I left the press conference 2.5 hours after it started, and Carl Froch was still conducting interviews at that stage. This is a huge, huge event in British boxing history.
Rob McCracken, as I say, you train Carl. How does his mood change? Because he's such an affable character normally.
Yeah, he gets a little bit edgy and a little bit tetchy the week of the fight. He gets a little bit short-tempered and a bit impatient with people, but that's natural with him. If he was full of the joys of springs, I'd be a little bit worried at this stage. But he just gets a little bit edgy.
Well, they've met once before, of course. And Mike, do you want to take us back to April the 24th, 2010?
Yes, one of the great fights of recent years, and it almost didn't happen. Froch was unbeaten at the time. He was making his third defence of the WBC title, and it was his second fight in the Super 6 tournament, in which he went on to reach the final. And he agreed to fight Kessler in Herning, in his home country of Denmark. And as the fight drew near, a volcanic ash cloud erupted over Iceland and caused havoc in air travel around Europe and beyond. So much so that Froch genuinely believed that the fight would be postponed, and some reporters and fans drove from the UK through 5 countries to get to the venue. Froch eventually went by a small private plane and had one of those frighteningly turbulent journeys that put you off flying for life, and somehow when he got there he had to retune mentally for a fight he told me he was sure would be called off.
Physically getting ready in the changing rooms, I think McCracken, my coach, sensed it as well. I was just a little bit flat and a little bit drained. On the night, I thought I'd lost the fight. But people want to know why, and people want reasons, and reasons aren't excuses. I flew in late underneath the volcanic ash cloud. I had to take a bit of weight off, which I've never done. I didn't feel sharp. I didn't feel light on my feet. I didn't feel like I had any energy warming up. And I usually feel invincible. I usually feel electric. I usually feel sharp and ready. And I never got that sense of feeling before the Kessler fight. It was all plodding and cumbersome and forced and loading up and tense. So there's been a bit of tension because I put Kessler on a bit of a pedestal. I made a big deal of him. I got a lot of respect for him. Probably showed too much respect for him in that fight. So there's a few things on the day that went wrong, and I think that's one of the main reasons why the fight was so good, so exciting, so close and so brutal.
And so a ring drenched in nervous tension is gradually cleared by the referee. Soon only he, Froch and Kessler will remain. Froch's 4th world title fight.
From round 2, 3 and 4, I started to feel like, bloody hell, I need to wake up here. I need to get on my toes. I need to feel like I've got energy, and I just didn't have any.
The nose of Carl Froch now is reddened with only a minute and 15 seconds gone in round 2. So this has all the makings of a tough night for both of these men.
In particular, in the 5th round, it was a very good round for you. There was debate as to whether Kessler had been knocked down.
And Kessler was forced to back up, and a second one from Froch gets through, and Froch lands 2 right hands in a row, and the referee doesn't count.
He did touch down, but the referee didn't score it as a knockdown. But that was a really good round for you, and we sensed that everything was turning your way.
Yeah, I think so as well. I mean, the knockdown probably wasn't a knockdown purely because a clean punch didn't land on a target area. But before the 3 punches that I hit him with that backed him up landed, if you look at it, he backed me up and I threw a right hook over the top and caught him on the side of the head. And that hurt him, definitely hurt him. And that's when I attacked him with 3 or 4 punches that he blocked. So I know he was hurt, but I wasn't able to then jump on him again. I sat back. There was a couple of times in the fight I threw a left hook and a straight right, landed flush. And then it was sort of like stand back and admire your work and let the judges know you've caught him, rather than going for the 4, 5 punch, 6 punch combination that potentially could get him out of there or get the referee thinking, hang on a minute, he's in trouble. I was on get through the fight mode rather than let's do the business mode.
Fair play to Kessler. He came straight back at you in the 6th round. I mean, right at the start of the 6th round, he landed a big right hand. And then we followed you back to the corner at the end of the round. And this is what you said.
Yeah, because you're waiting for him and you're letting him throw it.
The right hand kept coming down the middle. He kept throwing it down the middle and landing on my stomach because I was stood in front of him flat-footed. And the right hand was a real bleep. It really was. And I just let Rob know because it landed a few times, too many, too often. And it shouldn't have been landing. But I know what I did wrong, and we've put it right.
And in the 8th round, that right hand to the body became a right hand to the head, and your legs clearly buckled. I mean, how close were you to going down at that stage?
Probably as close as I've ever been to going down in my career, other than the Jermaine Taylor shot. I stood in front of him flat-footed again. I can remember it quite clearly. I hit him with a left-right, and I think I was loading up to hit him with another shot. You can see me come in, exactly what I shouldn't do and what Rob's been telling me not to do in sparring and on the build-up to this fight. And as I loaded up to try and smack him again, he just threw a straight right down the pipe and he landed on the bridge of my nose.
Tried a right hand, but he's met with a stronger right hand from Kessler, and Froch was hurt. Froch was badly hurt. He almost went down. He almost squatted.
And yes, it hurt. It stung. It wasn't the sort of shot that concusses you and makes you feel really dazed. It was more like, ouch, that hurt. But it did shake me to my boots.
There's blood by the right eye of Kessler, but Kessler is buoyed. He's ignoring that now, piling on the pressure. Left hook to the body, right hand over the top. Froch is in a neutral corner, just to our right here. Kessler is trying to open up again. 30 seconds to go in round 8, and these are troubling moments for Karl Froch.
It split my nose as well, and I wasn't very happy about that, and I was sort of rubbing my nose thinking, I've took a good shot there, and am I going to look like Quasimodo tomorrow morning? But we both did, I think.
You know what, Mike? I've been around Froch a long time. We are now entering, I believe, the most perilous 4 rounds, not just of his amateur career, but of his pro career.
I thought I took over then. I thought 9, 10, 11 and 12, I had very good rounds. I was finishing strong. He was looking tired, and he was looking like he was feeling sorry for himself. So I was putting the pressure on him. I'd found a bit of a second gear or a second wind, or whatever you want to call it. I was still flat-footed, but I got my gloves up higher, and I was landing with some good hooks and straight rights, and I was counter-punching him, and I was starting to enjoy it a little bit. I was smiling at him and hitting him with some good shots, and he started to look like he was falling apart, and I was unable to go up through the gears and close the show.
Kessler's got nothing left now as Karl Froch comes forward to the body, to the head. Left hook from Kessler, but it's weak, it's almost on instinct. Left hook from Froch. Big finish from the champion. Has it been enough? The timekeeper wraps the canvas. 10 seconds to go. Kessler with a last flurry. Lands a right hand. Froch gets him with a right hand. Kessler left hook at the end of the 12th and final round. The two men smile at each other. It's a smile of respect. A torrid contest over 12 rounds. It goes to the judges.
All 3 in favor of the winner and the new WBC super middleweight champion of the world, the Viking warrior, Mikkel Kessler.
Does that setback, because it was the first, still hurt?
Well, yeah, it's, you know, I often think about when I lost my WBC world title, and it's a bad moment, and I'll never forget sitting in the hotel room or the hotel lobby that night with my family. My brothers were there, and, you know, my mum and my stepdad and Rachel was there, and it was just very sort of miserable. It was a bad time, and the belt was there, but it didn't mean anything. It was empty because I was no longer champion. And, you know, Mikkel Kessler's promoters, the Sauerlands, Kalle, I can see his head shaking and his big teeth smiling and big hugs and that, and I thought, I want to rip him apart. Never know Mikkel Kessler. That was a bitter disappointment. It was a bad loss for me. I was devastated, but I picked myself up. And then I came back and I became 3 times world champ by beating Lucian Butte. And I'm on the crest of a wave now. I'm in the prime of my career. I can't let Mikkel Kessler now get away with doing what he did to me 3 years ago. Not on the form I'm in and where I am with my career. I just can't let that happen.
Karl Froch looking back on the evening of April the 24th, 2010, when he lost to Mikkel Kessler in Denmark after that flight and the volcanic cloud. He was speaking to Mike Costello, our 5 Live boxing commentator. He's with us. So is Steve Bunce, writer and broadcaster, and Rob McCracken, who trains Karl Froch. So, Rob, if you don't mind, he did say, I know what I did wrong, I'm going to right it, without giving too much away. What was different then to now?
Well, I think the fight shouldn't have taken place, being bluntly. For 3 days the fight was off. He was told it was off, and then on the Tuesday he was told he had to go through with it. It's all history. Obviously it was a very close, contentious fight, and Karl lost a narrow decision. But what you'll get Saturday is you'll get a motivated Karl Froch, somebody who wants to fight Saturday night, who's looking forward to getting revenge over Mikkel. And when Karl's motivated and he's at home, he's a formidable foe.
Tell us what that flight was like.
It was silly. It was, you know, we was in a tiny plane and we was blue all over the place. It was amazing we didn't crash. And the Saturday, Sunday, Monday, the fight was off. You know, this is what's not really been realised by a lot of people. It was off, and he was told it was off. And he was then called on a Tuesday and told to go through with the fight, or it could affect his career, and etc. and etc. So it's all history. Kessler boxed tremendously well on the night. He's a formidable opponent. Karl knows that, fully respects him, but Karl's ready for this one, and he wasn't ready for the one in Herning 3 years ago.
Does it put you off flying?
Oh, it was horrendous, honestly. It's the scariest flight I've ever been on. But I've never watched the fight. I was so really, really disappointed with the outcome in Herning and the circumstances. That I've never watched the fight, and I just can't bear myself to listen to the decision and see certain people celebrating. It was so irritating.
Oh dear. I wish I'd known that before. Would have given you earmuffs or something like the Generation Game. Okay, Steve Bunce, you were ringside. Did Carl Froch look out of sorts before the fight took place?
Not necessarily look out of sorts, but we knew there'd been a problem. We knew there'd been the fight that was off, then it was on. We knew there'd been still some doubts. We knew there'd been a horrendous flight over. We saw both Carl and Rob when they landed, and they were still shaky. So we knew there'd been some problems, and Carl's a perfectionist when it comes to getting ready. So we heard there was some niggly problems. We knew there was possibly a slight weight issue. Bear in mind, these are athletes, so a quarter of a pound, which is not that much to average people. It's a lot of weight.
You think the weight issue was because of the on-off nature of the fight?
I'm sure it was for that weekend. When a fight's off for 3 days, even if in the back of your mind you think, this could be called back on, you're still not. There's no way you're still in a fight mode. So we knew a few of these things. However, the first 5 rounds went very well, especially the 5th round, which was a dominant round. I thought, and I wrote at the time, and I remember, and I certainly said it, I thought it was a legitimate knockdown. And what the way I looked at the fight was Carl did seem to fade. The body shots were a beep, as he said, which will never be repeated ever in 5 Live commentary, thankfully. And down the stretch, I thought the crowd did lift Kessler, who, as Mike said there in that brilliant piece of commentary, was finished at the end. It was a genuine seesaw fight, and that punch in the 8th round that split the bridge of Carl's nose. We were so close, Payne. It's one of those few occasions when you actually hear the jar. You don't hear a slap. It's not a slapping noise. You heard something hard hitting something hard, and it hits you. It goes through your head and goes through your body, and you never forget that.
Mike, how did you see the fight?
Well, as I said in the introduction to that package we heard there, I thought it was one of the great fights of recent years. And when I look back on it, I think maybe that's the best we've seen of Kessler, and that's the best that Kessler has to offer, because there was a lot in his favour there. He was in his home country. He didn't have any kind of travel problems. He didn't have any kind of injury problems that we knew about at that time. And whereas he produced his best on the night, and for me, that's the best he's ever produced, I think Carl can be better than he was on that night. So if he ran Kessler so close then he must have the advantage this time round. And there were genuine reasons, they're not excuses, behind what he's talking about, the volcanic ash cloud and the flight that Rob's talking about, because fighters can be creatures of habit, and they want the fight week to go as it's always gone when they've won fights. And so it's not a case of superstition. It's just that if it's worked before, they want that same program to work again. And so if you're landing later in the week than you would otherwise be doing, then all of those preparations are thrown into chaos. And that really troubled Carl, because he has a very tidy mind.
And Rob, you know Carl very well. You've trained with him. I think he was the best man at your wedding. Was it a good speech?
Well, yeah, he's very smart. Carl is a very smart individual, but going back to the fight, let's get it right. Mikkel Kessler's a top fighter, and he's a very dangerous puncher as well. So it's a pretty stiff task ahead on Saturday. There's been no real evidence that he's gone downhill. We hear this, but there's no evidence at all of it. And he looked as good as ever in his last contest. Carl's prepared, and we've prepared for the best Kessler ever that's on offer, and that's what I think we'll get on Saturday night. And this is a real tough fight Saturday night.
And when you get into the build up to a fight, Ian, and when reporters and pundits and old trainers gather round, and there seems to be an opinion formed around one quote. I remember it happened when Ricky Hatton fought Floyd Mayweather in Las Vegas, and it suddenly grew during the week that Floyd Mayweather was going to be greatly troubled and destroyed by Hatton's body punching. And here this week, we're hearing that Mikkel Kessler all of a sudden can't go backwards. That's what we're hearing here, and that's going to be the key to Carl Froch's victory, that Kessler can't go backwards. Now, this is a man who, in his career, and his professional career is now 15 years old, has been beaten only by Andre Ward and Joe Calzaghe, 2 magnificent super middleweights. He can't be doing that much wrong if they're the only 2 men who've managed to beat him.
When a fight, Mike's, as brutal as the Froch-Kessler obviously was, how hard is it for the boxers to sort of curb their natural instincts and stay in the ring rather than quit? I mean, there was a very interesting insight on this recently from Paulie Malignaggi, who's been in with a few tough fighters.
Yeah, he was reflecting on his career in general, but in particular on his first world title fight, which was against the great Puerto Rican Miguel Cotto at Madison Square Garden in 2006. And Malignaggi was badly cut in the first round. He was floored heavily in the second round and finished with a grotesque swelling on one side of his face because of a broken orbital bone, basically, which houses the eye socket. And he lost in the end valiantly on points. And he spoke of why he carried on that night, why fighters go through this kind of torture when the basic human instinct is to walk away, to quit. And given what Carl Froch has been through in his career, he told me how he understands exactly what Malignaggi is talking about in those experiences.
Yeah, I saw that interview and I can relate to what he said. I thought it was great what he said, but I think when you're fighting, I think it's important not to make a big deal of it. And 10 years ago, before I met Robert McCracken, I would have made a big deal of it, and shots that hurt you and you maybe think, oh, this is getting tough, you maybe look for a way out. But because of Robert McCracken's mental demeanour and his attitude towards fighting and the whole thing, let's not make a big deal of it. You've got gloves on, you've got a referee, I'm here to pull you out if we need to pull you out. If it all goes terribly wrong, I'll save you anyway, and it's never going to go that wrong because you know how to fight, you know how to defend yourself. And yeah, I broke my hand against Brian McGee in round 2 or round 3, and I ruptured my bicep against a guy called Dale Westerman in round 2, and I broke my hand in round 4 against Henry Porras. And I go back to the corner and I say, Rob, my hand's hurt, and he'll say, forget your hand, right, what you need to do is get behind your jab and work him. And then before you know it, I forgot about the hand. Rob's attitude in the corner is get on with it. Don't tell me about an injury, you've got to fight. You're not pulling out, that's for sure. I don't think you ever get to a point where you can't physically throw punches. Unless you break your back and you can't walk, I don't think there's any reason to pull out of a fight. What he did the other day against Ricky Burns, I just thought wasn't good enough. He said he'd hurt his wrist. I broke my wrist. You don't know you broke your wrist. You've not had an x-ray yet. I knew my hand was really hurting against Brian McGee. It wasn't until I had it x-rayed, I had a Bennett's fracture and my bone was in half and trying to poke out the skin. It was in a bad way. But I knocked him out in round 11. Had I pulled out of that fight and let the human instinct kick in that Malignaggi was talking about and quit, my whole career could have been finished there. And I think Robert, with his amateur experience, his professional experience, he's competed at top level, as an amateur and a pro, and he knows me inside out. He knows me inside out. He can look at my eyes and know what I'm thinking, Rob can. And that works in the corner. And, when I've hurt my hand or I've got a bad rib or I've ruptured my bicep, I don't complain about it. I don't even think about telling Rob about it. It's not worth it. It's just get on with it. That's the fight game, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, I mean, Rob, listening to that, it's quite a responsibility on your shoulders, isn't it? I was directed to a website of the picture of Denis Ledvedev, I think his name was, who was fighting against Guillermo Jones in a cruiserweight fight in Moscow last weekend, and Ledvedev's face was just pulp. When do you know enough is enough with someone like Carl Froch?
Yeah, you know, if you understand the sport and you have an experience in the sport, you know the point where that's enough, let's go home, the night's over, and he's put his career in my hands for many a year, and he's confident in my ability to make a call at any time during a bout that he's involved in. Let's be realistic, it's a tough sport. The boxer's health and safety must be paramount, must come first. But, we have an understanding that it certainly does, and Carl trusts me.
Are there sort of trigger signs that you have between each other to say, I'm in a bit of trouble here or not?
Well, I think, Mike and Steve are well aware that you can see a point in a bout where the bout's probably not winnable, and the level of punishment that the boxer starts to receive gets to a point where what's the point? So if ever there was a what's the point moment with Carl or any boxer I was working with, then it's time to go home and let's get him out there and let's live to fight another day, because I think too many fighters in the past have been unfortunately left in there too long for an unnecessary beating when the fight's unwinnable.
Yeah, doubly difficult when he's a close friend of yours. What do you think, Steve?
Well, it's interesting. Last weekend there were extremes, both the best and the worst of boxing. Lebedev against Guillermo Jones. I've never seen anything like it. The corner should have pulled him out. The doctor should have pulled him out. The referee should have pulled him out 5 rounds earlier. That was a disgrace. Everybody needs to have their hands wrapped. And yet 24 hours later, a guy called Darren Barker was in the corner for the very first time in his life, and he pulled out his friend in what should have been a world title fight because he had no chance of winning, not because he was getting beaten. So we saw someone doing something fantastically sensible, and we saw some people in Moscow that should never be let to work with boxers ever again. It was disgraceful what we saw in Moscow.
If you've got a point to make, if you want to talk about the fight, who you think might win, what do you think about the dangers of it, do get in touch with us. And as always, the best and easiest way to do that is just to text the simple number 85058.
Get ready to rumble!
5 Live Boxing.
I'm Ian Payne, you're listening to 5 Live Boxing ahead of the world title fight between Froch and Mikkel Kessler. It's live here on 5 Live from 10:45 after the Champions League final on Saturday night. With me, Rob McCracken, who trains Froch, the boxing writer and broadcaster, and well-known 5 Live regular Steve Bunce, and 5 Live's boxing commentator Mike Costello. Mike, before we move on, I've been told I have to ask you about a coin toss today to decide who's going to walk to the ring first. Was it significant?
Yeah, the custom is that the challenger walks to the ring first and the champion second, the feeling being that the challenger is left to stew in the ring while the champion gets himself ready and potentially the challenger loses his nerve. But as they're both carrying belts into the ring, it was decided to toss a coin to determine who should walk first. And the promoter, Eddie Hearn, stood up in the middle of the press conference dais today, pulled a coin from his pocket and turned to Froch and said heads or tails. Now, Froch is one of the most articulate, straight-talking, single-minded athletes I've ever dealt with in all my time working in sport. And he turned to Robert McCracken and said, "What should I do?" How clear an illustration is that of the bond between those two and how much he relies on Robert McCracken.
What did you decide, Rob?
We called heads and we lost, but we was really pleased, to be honest with you, because we knew Kessler would want to go to the ring second, and Carl entered the ring first when he fought Lucien Butte, and you know, we got lucky with the toss of the coin because Butte walked to the ring with Froch in it, with the whole crowd behind him. Kessler would have walked to the ring first with nobody in the ring, and we felt that it's best he walked to the ring looking at Froch and looking at that crowd, and that'll certainly get him nervous.
Right, let's talk a little bit more about Kessler. He's a very colourful character, literally, that huge tattoo of the Viking warrior all over his body. His family's involved in a sort of Osborne-like reality TV show. He's a huge star over there. All the famous Danish people know him. He's got an English mother. She's a character. He's got an interesting niece. She's a character. And a really interesting elder sister who I've been struggling to describe in 5 Live language because she is, as we say, colourful. Steve Bunce will be on the case after we've heard from one of his friends, because you're compiling a nice 5 Live type description of her. That's all I'll say. Google it if you want. Let's find out more about him. A little earlier, I spoke to a friend of his. It's the Leicester City goalkeeper, Kasper Schmeichel.
Well, he's a gentleman. I've heard Froch say it many times that you know, he is a gentleman, and from knowing him, he's a top guy, a very relaxed man. But you know, you can see when he trains and when he fights, he's very aggressive in his style, and you know, he's someone who's he's on top of the world in terms of his game, and but he's a very grounded guy and very generous and very kind. He's a superstar here. There's no question. He's probably our biggest sporting star, and a very popular guy in Denmark because of his demeanour, his attitude. He's not an arrogant man in any way. He's very, very popular.
He's very, very popular. Now, Steve Bunce, tell us a little bit about this reality TV show and the interesting family that Kessler has on show.
Well, they're a lively bunch, the Kesslers, and I've always felt that Mikkel, if he wasn't a fighter, he'd be part of a Scandinavian bike gang, and I mean that nicely. Now, you get that idea from the people around him, the close people, and honestly, you know what I'm saying. I mean, these guys don't walk to the ring surrounded by choir boys and choir, you know, and Girl Scouts. They really, really don't, unless they're Girl Scouts in uniform. So quite honestly, when you see the people around Kessler and you see him, he's this really nice guy and he's a fantastically friendly guy and he's a brilliant athlete and he's a real gentleman. But you get the idea that if he wasn't a boxer and he was with this mob that travel with him, you get the idea he'd be a biker gang. And if you've seen Scandinavian biker gangs, they're as scary as New Zealand Maori biker gangs. They really are quite scary. And as for his sister, well, I'm struggling slightly. She's an enhanced character. Let's put it that way. She's definitely sort of part of that whole Scandinavian Jane Mansfield Appreciation Society. The suggestion is that she's enhanced to such a degree that she's the most enhanced female in Scandinavia.
Yeah, I gather it's a J. That's all I'll say.
I'll leave it as well.
Okay, fair enough. The mother is very interesting. She's English. I think she's in her late 60s or maybe early 70s. She apparently, in this programme, she goes down to her local pub, because old habits die hard if you're English, and she has a pint of brown ale, or a drink of brown ale, 365 days a year, and then the niece, the daughter of his sister, she's a pole dancer. So, as I say, it's a colourful thing, and I think... Have you ever seen the programme, Mike?
No, I haven't actually.
It's
Rob,
lively.
You seen it, Rob?
No, unfortunately not.
There was a bizarre scene today Ian, at the entrance to the O2 Arena. Actually, I walked in with Rob. I met him coming up the escalator on the tube station there at North Greenwich, leading into the O2 Arena. And as we got to the entrance of the O2 Arena, there was this very orderly, well-mannered queue of Viking warriors, with a great pile of spears and helmets and shields on the security belt going through the checkpoint.
Well, I'll tell you how popular it is. I think that the population of Denmark is 5 million, and the subscription is £55 in our money, Danish money, over there to watch it, the pay-per-view, their version of the pay-per-view. And they have sold up to 70,000 of these £55 packages, which is absolutely amazing. It's difficult. I mean, I know you have to, Rob, or Carl has to, but it's difficult to hate him, isn't it?
No, he's a nice person. Mikkel, he's a tremendous fighter and a tremendous athlete. If I'm being totally honest, what I think about when I consider him is what he's about as a fighter, and he's a very difficult fighter to beat. And it's been a long, hard camp for this, and Carl's fully focused for it. But he means business. Kessler, he's a tough opposition.
And also, what you have to understand, Painey, is that it's not just hard; it's fairly difficult to dislike him. But what happened is Kessler and Carl bonded. There were a series of press conferences to promote the thing called the Super Six. One in Berlin, one at the Tivoli Gardens in Copenhagen, one in New York. Sadly, they didn't have one in the Lace District in Nottingham, which really annoyed me, to be honest with you. And at all of those, Carl was telling us, and still tells you, that at those different conferences with different fighters and promotional people around, it was him and Kessler that became pals. Him and Kessler had things in common. Him and Kessler were the ones that became friends, as opposed to some of them were a bit arrogant or they didn't gel. It was always, it seemed to me, him and Kessler.
Can you just... There might be a lot of people listening to this who are not boxing experts, who keep wondering what this Super Six tournament was. So what was it and how did it work?
I'll go first, Mike. It was a tournament devised by some people, some TV executives at Showtime, to put the 6 best super middleweights in the world in a series of fights.
So it's not like Sky's prize fight?
No. It took place, in fact, it was meant to take place over, I think, 2 years and a couple of months, and it ended up taking nearly 3 years. It took too long, but it was an absolutely brilliant tournament. Different guys would fight each other, leading up to 2 semi-finals and then 2 guys in the final. Sadly, several people pulled out, including Kessler, after the Carl Froch fight, because he needed an operation on some damage to his left eye. So basically, it was the 6 best fighters at super middleweight, 12 stone in old money, fighting each other in a series of fights until they eliminated each other, so there were just 2 men left standing. And those 2 men left standing were Carl Froch and a guy called Andre Ward. Ward having beaten Kessler on his way to the final.
And what's interesting as well, Ian, about the bond that Steve talks about that they forged in the build-up to that Super Six tournament, I thought for the first time today there was a striking difference in the mood of Carl Froch. And it wasn't just me that noticed that. And one of the reasons was that Kessler's trainer, Jimmy Montoya, got up onto the dais and spoke about what they'd done since the first fight. And Carl has mentioned that he's boxed 48 rounds since their first fight, whereas Kessler's boxed only 13. And Carl has seen that as an advantage. And Jimmy Montoya got up and said, yes, he's had more rounds, but he's been abused and bashed about in more rounds. And Carl has taken umbrage at that. Also at a comment by Mikkel Kessler that he feels he's got the power to knock Carl out. And Carl felt that the whole tone changed and clearly that he should change with it. But it was a very different Carl Froch in the build-up to this fight than in the press conference ahead of the first one, for sure.
I remember doing an interview with Amir Khan's trainer, is it Virgil Hunter?
Virgil Hunter,
and asked him, because he's Andre Ward's trainer as well, and I asked him about that fight. He said that Ward had beaten Froch and Ward had a broken hand during the fight. Well, that's fighting through the pain barrier, isn't it?
Yeah, listen, the damaged hand, it's one of those things, I think, as people took, Carl mentioned in his comment, how do you know your hand's broken? He had a damaged hand at some point in that fight. But then we can go forward. Kessler had a damaged hand against Joe Kawasaki. Carl had an injured shoulder against Kessler. 2 fighters, Rob will tell you this, there's never 2 fighters get in the ring without some sort of damage, even if it's your little toe, like David Hay.
Had a little toe, there we are. Now listen, Mike, I want to ask you, because I know you've spoken to both boxers at length in the build-up to this fight. How close was Kessler to ending his boxing career after beating Froch?
Well, it sounds like he had retired, at least in his mind, because of a serious eye injury. The problem related to nerves around his left eye. In simple terms, if they couldn't be fused together again, then he risked not just losing his career, but the sight in that left eye. And the problem surfaced not only in the Froch fight, but in the fight before that against Andre Ward, which he lost. And after beating Froch, Kessler had 14 months out of the ring until he got the all clear from doctors. And he told me today he was preparing for life without boxing.
Of course, I had my thoughts on a lot of things, but of course I didn't want to give up the fight, want to take it easy and eat healthy and try to do the best for my eye so it can grow back together, and because I could feel myself I wasn't finished with the boxing, and my career wasn't over, so I didn't want to speculate too much on what's after boxing. So of course you have some thought, what should I do now and what's the next step, but I had to wait 8 months and let's see if it's not going together. It could take 8 months to 1.5 years. So after that then I could decide what's going to happen.
And eventually you got back in the ring after 14 months. When you first sparred though, were you very tentative and very nervous about what might happen?
Yes, very. The first sparring part I had was light sparring, and they hit me a couple of times, and I was like, okay, my eyes still good, my eyes are still good, so we just keep on going. But like for the first month, I had very light sparring and not so much at a time, so it was very important.
But do you still feel deep down that you can dig like you had to do in the first fight again?
Yes, I know I have to, and I trained so hard for this fight, so I feel like I have the energy to it, and as I said, every fight of mine is maybe the last one, so I will give everything I have and more too. So I know Carlos is gonna come hard. I know, but he also gonna be a little desperate, I think, and that's a good thing. It's gonna be a massive and a very hard fight, but I have the energy. I have the energy to come back after an eye injury. I have the energy to fight these guys. They've never been stopped so fast before. I did my game plan very good, and now and me and Montoya has been working very hard for this fight, and a lot of technique and a lot of stuff. So I can do so much new things, and yeah, I feel 200% ready for this fight.
And you said it's massive. You've been a professional for 15 years. Fights like this don't come around that often. The emotion, the atmosphere.
Yeah. It's, when I fought Joe Gassak, was crazy atmosphere, 55,000 people. It's a lot more than this, but still it was the atmosphere, the pressure, and it's good. I like it. That's why I'm a fighter. I like this. When you're a kid, you wanted the big fight. This is a big fight.
That was Mike speaking to Kessler earlier this week. Mike, a load has been written and said and broadcasted saying that Kessler is on the slide since losing to Froch. Can we really believe that veracity or not?
I don't see how we can, because in the 3 fights he's had since he beat Carl Froch, he's won them all, and he hasn't boxed anybody, I will say, of the level of Carl Froch, and that's one of the reasons that we can't make that clearer judgment. I just don't see where people are getting this from. Yes, there are rumours that the sparring sessions he's been having haven't gone all his way. But look, sometimes it's the mark of a great fighter that they don't get up for sparring, but they really produce on the night of the fight. One of the great victories in my lifetime was Sugar Ray Leonard beating Marvellous Marvin Hagler. And just a few days before the fight, he was floored in sparring. It happens like that. Sometimes they just cannot get up for the rigours of sparring, especially after, as I say, 15 years as a professional. But once they get there and they feel that surge of atmosphere on Saturday night, it's very, very rare that fighters like Mikkel Kessler and Carl Froch do not produce their best.
It's just a bizarre, lazy assumption, because he's only had 3 fights, because he's been out 14 months. He's unbeaten. He had to recover from a shock knockdown to knock someone's spark out a couple of fights ago. It's just this lazy assumption that he must be on the slide. And it's based on absolutely nothing. It's based on the fact that, well, you know, he didn't box for 14 months. He hasn't fought men as good as Carl. Well, I suppose you could say he hasn't had to go through grueling 12-round fights. I find it really ridiculous, slightly absurd, and also slightly insulting that people can just make that comment. You heard how he sounds. We've heard about the sparring sessions. Sparring sessions for top quality fighters seldom go that well when there's good sparring partners. We always base it on big heavyweights who get in there, Lennox Lewis and Tyson, and smash the granny out of people that have been paid to take a beating. It doesn't work that way with Carl Froch. Yes. Why would Robert McCracken employ a sparring partner for Carl to just hit him? He can hit the bleeding bag. He hasn't got to hit a sparring partner. Sparring sessions are there so that you try and learn something, even at Carl's age. So I get slightly infuriated, as you can hear, with this sloppy journalism and sloppy so-called experts telling me that Kessler's shot. How? Why? Where? Forget it.
Rob, when you're building up to a fight, do you take much notice of what's going on in the other camp? What do you listen to and what do you disregard?
You don't listen to a lot, really. I think Steve's hit the nail on the head with sparring. It's nothing like fighting. It just helps you to prepare and you work on a bit of tactical stuff. All the top fighters very rarely spar great. They seem to be, the top fighters seem to be average sparrers and great fighters. You get lots of world champions in the gym that can't produce it in the ring. It just tends to be the trend with elite fighters. But yeah, we've heard a few things about Kessler and preparation, but when they get in the ring on fight night, you'll see two top fighters going at it, and all the stories that have came out of the Kessler camp have been that, you know, he's been outboxed, etc. But that will just have sharpened him up, and he'll have been aware of his mistakes, and he'll have corrected them as he's gone on.
Mike, has home form got such an advantage as it has in other sports?
I think it has, and I was talking to Mikkel Kessler about that this week, and I think one element in Kessler's favour is that he's been through it before. You know, he's experienced both sides of this. He's had the fans for him, for example, in the first fight against Froch, but he's been very much up against it, as he was when he fought Joe Calzaghe in 2007, 55,000 people with the roof closed at the Millennium Stadium. And he was telling me this week that what he's learned from that fight against Calzaghe is that when Carl Froch throws a punch or a cluster of punches on Saturday night, if they don't land, he will just absolutely convince himself that they didn't land. Kessler will say to himself, look, I don't care what the crowd are doing. I don't care how loudly they're cheering. Those punches didn't land. I've just got to hold firm and carry on and keep to my game plan and not be swayed by the crowd. But sometimes it's inevitable that the judges are.
We talked about the sparring, Rob. Kessler's been sparring with a couple of British boxers, Nathan Cleverly and George Groves, in the build-up to this fight. It's clearly annoyed Carl. I presume it's annoyed you too. Why is that?
I think a fight of this magnitude, it's you know, I'll concur with Carl. It's fairly disappointing that, you know, listen, let's get it right. They're not sparring partners, George Groves and Nathan Cleverly. They have upwardly mobile careers. They don't need to go to other countries and spar with people. And it's pretty disappointing to go and do that when they know that a foreign fighter's preparing to fight a British fighter in a huge fight for British boxing. So, you know, I agree. I don't agree or take any notice of people that are saying it's going to improve them, it's good for them, etc. I think it's a very disappointing move on behalf of, you know, the people concerned, to be honest.
OK, more reaction in a moment. Let's hear the other side of the story, because earlier George Groves, one of those British sparring partners, gave Mike his side of the story.
Carl's been telling a lot of porkies, hasn't he, really? He's first of all, when I got to Denmark, they said, well, Carl's been telling the Danish press that you're out here on a spying mission, working for Carl. And I said, I very much doubt that. And then when I get back, Carl's also said that I'm a traitor for going out and sparring with a guy who's fighting a British guy. But at the same time, Carl told me very recently that I'm not good enough. I need to go out and get an experience before I can fight him or anyone of his, you know, standing. So I thought, well, why not go out and spar the guy that beat him? So I thought, you know, that could work well for me. And since I've been back, you know, it's surprising how bent out of shape he got over it. Considering he's got a big fight Saturday, he shouldn't be too concerned with what I'm doing. But he is. I think he knows that I move very quickly up the rankings, and there's a possibility that I could be fighting the winner of this Saturday night. I hope so, obviously. I do hope that Carl wins Saturday as well, and it's a possible big fight down the line for us both.
So tell me how the sparring went then, generally.
Yeah, the sparring was great. For me, apart from the fact that he's getting increasingly difficult to get good quality sparring right before a big fight. So it's different when you're sort of 8-0, 10-0 contender. Anyone, you can spar anyone of any level, but once people feel that you could box them something that's very close down the line, they're not very interested. But Mikkel, identified me as a great sparring partner for him, which was, the humble part of me will take that as a massive compliment that an established world champion has sort of sourced me out. And Carl didn't pick up the phone to ask me for sparring. In fact, he hasn't done that since we sparred before he boxed Kessler the first time. And going on that, he went out and unfortunately lost that fight. So I think I've done him a favour. I've gone out and softened Mikkel up for him a little bit, just like maybe the first time. So I'm British through and through.
British fighter George Groves speaking to Mike there about why he's sparring with Carl Froch's opponents. Well, Carl isn't here to answer that, but the second best thing is his trainer, Rob McCracken. So would you like a right of reply?
I just think that, we've got to get realistic here. You're talking about a boxer who's had 15 fights. He's not from the same planet as Carl Froch and Mikkel Kessler. I don't, presume he will ever get to that level. Good luck to him. He's a young prospect, and we want British fighters to do well, and we want them to represent Britain on the highest stage. But when you're talking about boxers who've had 15 pro fights, and then you start talking about the likes of Carl Froch and Mikkel Kessler, then it's not really a conversation, to be honest, at this stage.
Sounds to me like if you did fight him, it would be fairly comfortable for Carl then.
Well, there's levels in boxing, and kids need to develop as fighters and to be brought through so that when they do fight, that the top elite fighters, they're ready and they have enough experience fight-wise to be able to equip themselves well. I think, boxers like George Groves are youngsters coming through and stuff, but they have a long way to go.
Would you ever fight him, do you think, or cleverly?
I think when you think about somebody like Carl Froch, Carl Froch has seeked out time and time again the best fighters on the planet around his way. Carl Froch will fight anybody. He'd fight Steve Bunce if Bunce wanted to fight.
I don't know. Bunce is looking in good shape to me.
But listening. We have to be realistic here, and right now, if you put Carl Froch in with somebody who's not an elite fighter, then it's going to be a formality. Let's be honest.
Mike, just round up where we're left with this fight. Now, we've obviously had Andre Ward. Whether he fights the winner of this, he's beaten both of them. Is it a British title fight after that? How do you see the future? I know it's difficult for Rob to talk about it, but what do you think?
I think this is a really important night for Carl Froch, because mentally for him, when he looks back on his career, he says that he wants to correct one of the blemishes. He's been beaten by only Andre Ward and Mikkel Kessler. This will cancel out one of those defeats, and then he'll go looking possibly for Andre Ward again. But if he should win this on Saturday night and win impressively, and remember how it will sound on radio and television as well, and how it will be reported around the world, because this is a huge fight on many American websites as we turned into 2013. This was one of the must-see fights. This was one of the fights that everybody wanted to see made. It has been made, and I think it's really important for British boxing as well. We haven't had a lot to celebrate so far this year in terms of top level sport that really crashes onto the back pages and nudges football aside every now and again. And Carl Froch against Mikkel Kessler is one of those fights that does that. And if Carl Froch should win, he has no end of options after Saturday night, and people will come running his way. He'll be able to pick and choose, believe me.
Thanks, Mike. Mike will be gargling for the next couple of days. Rob, very good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you for being our guest tonight. And a final quick roundup from Steve. How do you put this fight into context?
Well, as Mike said, it is our best quality fight so far this year, and it's unlikely to be touched for the rest of the year. We're dependent on Carl for that just extra bit of quality, as Robert McCracken said. However, what no one's thinking about here and talking about here is the third fight, November. Painey, book us in.
You think it'll be another one, do you?
Why not? If it's close after 12, why not?
Brilliant. Thank you very much to all our guests, to Steve Bunce and to Rob McCracken and Mike Costello. Don't forget, Froch against Kessler is live on 5 Live, 10:45 p.m. this Saturday night. Mike and Bunce is going to be ringside for us, alongside Colin Murray and Ricky Hatton. Next